Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Sloan from TAC. I am, for those of you who've done this before, Stacy is at a different meeting today, and so I'm going to do my best to channel her, which you know is pretty tough. We'll be recording this session, so please be aware of that. Today's session is on PRA reporting. We will be reviewing the programmatic reporting format and the quarterly budget reporting format for both the FY13 and highlighting the changes for those of you who are running FY12 grants. I want to make sure everybody realizes that you're on mute. Hopefully we're not and you can hear us. You can, if you want to, there will be times where you can ask a question specifically, and at that point, if you use your PIN number, you'll be able to raise your hand. We'll see you on the screen. We'll unmute you, but we really encourage you to also submit your questions via the text chat box whenever you have them, and we'll probably stop at a couple points and answer those questions. Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Katina.
I would just like to say welcome everyone once again. Thank you, Lisa, for going over the rules for today. So in today's call, we will be reviewing the program reporting requirements. We'll first start with an overview of the process, including the due dates, before we move on to walking you through both the programmatic and the budget quarterly reporting forms. After that, we'll take questions, and then we'll talk about the next steps. So here's some of our reporting goals, and this is kind of the reasons why we need for you to report, and these are sort of the items that we kind of look at. We assess whether the federal funding is being used as intended. We assess whether the program is meeting the performance goals as outlined in the application. We also want you to demonstrate your program outcomes. We also want you to describe your current program status, and then we also use this tool to assess whether your needs for your technical assistance. So these are some of the reporting goals that we have outlined for you. Here's a look at the overview of the reporting tools. The PRA program has two quarterly reporting tools. The first is the programmatic report, which asks questions about the people, including applicants and tenants, as well as about the housing, including your RACs, your PRA units, and your leverage vouchers. This, what the applicant data tells us is who is applying, is the grantee reaching the target population, are many applicants found ineligible? Does the program have a healthy waiting list? Are referrals made in a timely manner? Are there rejections by owner? The tenant data tells us is whether or not the housing is the tenants in stable housing. Are there many transfers? How many evictions? Are participants often terminated from the program? So these are sort of the data that we get from the reporting tool. So for the budget report, which is done quarterly, we ask questions about your administrative expenditures as well as your rental assistance. And in the budget report, which you'll see later, you will see that it will track the actual and your projected. This tool is designed to help grantees meet their reporting requirements in their cooperative agreement and ensure the grantee has not over-obligated the funds. So it's kind of taking responsibility as looking at your program financially to see your expenditures within the program through your admin costs as well as your rental assistance. So the due dates, we're gonna talk about those. Both are due quarterly. Once the last RAC is executed, which is your budget report, you may submit budget reports once at the end of the year. Once all of the units have been leased, you may submit your programmatic report annually. For FY13 grantees, it's important to remember that your first quarterly report will be due July 31st and will cover 2 reporting periods, your cooperative agreement signing through June 30th. So remember, if you got your cooperative agreement, let's say most of you got it in February, that will be the date that you start reporting from through June 30th. Now, we collectively decided to be a little less confusing is to put both the programmatic report and the budget report on the same cycle. So now both will be on the fiscal year cycle. Before, the programmatic report was on a calendar year cycle and the budget report was on the federal fiscal year cycle. So we decided it would be a lot simpler to put them both on the federal fiscal year cycle. So here's a kind of a chart of what I was just talking about. This indicates that the due dates for both reports. If you can look at it, you see under quarters, you have quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then it will tell you which months that it covers and when the reports are due. So if you had your programmatic was calendar year, as you can see now, it's going to be on the fiscal year cycle. FY12 grantees, you just submitted reports for quarter 2 covering January through March. Your next report for quarter 3 ending in June will be due at the end of July. As previously stated, for FY13 grantees, your first report is due July 31st and will cover January through June quarters 2 and 3. Now I'm going to turn it over to Marvis, who's going to talk about the current status of the report.
Thanks, Katina. Okay, so as far as our current status, as you can see from this slide, it does give you an update of what's been going on with regards to our reporting. The programmatic report has now been used for 6 quarters by our FY12 grantees. And we agreed to have the grantees test the report for several quarters and then to finalize it. For FY13 grantees, you will be using the finalized version. The budget report has been used by our 12 grantees for 5 quarters. So at this point, I want to pause and turn it over to Lisa, who's going to do a demonstration in regards to our reporting tools. Lisa?
Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick overview of a couple points before we dig into the tools themselves. You should have received this morning both a copy, since you signed up for this, both a copy of these slides, the PowerPoint, as well as the tools that we're going to be reviewing. So both the programmatic and the budget report are Excel spreadsheets. You received 2 versions of the programmatic report. One of them is, I think the suffix said something about highlighted report. We're going to use that one today because it highlights the changes that were made from the FY12 report, draft report, the one that the FY12 grantees have been using, but you received a version that is unhighlighted that you'll be able to use. The programmatic report has 3 sections, 3 tabs. You'll see a first tab is instructions, second tab are the tools, and actually there are tabs for each year. And then the standards and definitions, which are kind of your encyclopedia, your reference if you have a question about what you're supposed to be, data you're supposed to be collecting or reporting. The budget report is also an Excel spreadsheet and also has 3 sections. The instructions, the tool, and with the budget report, we're going to look at a sample that is in there. Okay, so I'm going to just switch the screen so we can go into, we're going to start with the programmatic tool, report tool. If you want, as I said, the first tab are the basic instructions, and you also have to complete some basic information just once the first time you do this about your project. Excuse me. So tab 2, which says, you can see at the bottom here, 2016. You're going to be completing this for each quarter, as you just heard from Katina and Marvis. We're going to go over each section. As Katina said, the first half of the report's about the people, and it will go from kind of in order in which the program happens, referrals to the program, placing people on your waiting list, if any, referrals to units, move-ins, and then questions about tenure, how long people have been living there. And then in the units, same kind of thing. There are some new questions about ARACs we'll talk about in a second, RACs, the number of units, and lease-up. So we're going to go through all of that kind of briskly, and then we'll do the budget one, and then we'll see if we have any questions, okay? But put questions in the chat box if you have them. First, I want to point out that before the FY12 panic, this change to having everything on the fiscal year, the intention is to streamline things for you, make it easier. You do not have to move. If you were on the calendar year, you would have just completed quarter 1. And the reports you just submitted to us, you put all your data in the column for quarter 1. You don't need to fix that. We're going to fix it for you when we return the documents to you. So don't worry about that. We'll make that fix for you. So right now, for those of you, it is May, and we are in quarter 3. I had to think about that for a second. We're in quarter 3. So as Katina said, the FY on July 31st, by July 31st, you all, if you're an FY12 state, you'll be submitting data for quarter 3. And if you're an FY13 state, you'll be submitting data for 2 and 3 because you haven't submitted any information yet. And there probably won't be very much in your chart, and that's fine. We'll give you a chance to get started to see how you're going to complete it. Okay, let's work through it. The first questions are about depending on how your program works, program applicants or referrals. What's the total number of households who applied or referred to the PRA program during the quarter? Question 4 is, of those households, please tell us what target population they fit in. And the examples are people who were institutionalized, at risk of institutionalization, homeless, at risk of homelessness, leaving group homes, adult care homes, or other kinds of residential settings, exiting foster care, or other. If you use the other category, we ask you to specify and fill in the box on the right. These categories were worked through over a year ago with the FY12, looking at the populations they were served. We did a monkey survey. We did some testing. We think they'll work for the most part for the FY13s as well. And so we think it'll work. And you're going to see these categories, the same categories throughout the report. Question 5. Of the total number of applicants that came to the program, were referred to the program, please tell HUD their primary disability type or their disability type. People can fall into more than one category. You can see in the instructions here and the instructions in the standards, you only answer this once a year at the end of quarter 4. and you only answer it if 10 or more applicants, there are 10 or more applicants in a disability category. So for example, you'd have to have 11 or 12 people in the physical disability category or the mental health category or the IDD category at the end of the year, the fiscal year, in order to report. If you don't have, if you only had 5 people referred to the program, then you're not going to answer this question. Okay, we'll see if you have questions about that. Number 6, for the same referrals, HUD would like to know what agency referred the individual. Is it a state agency? And if so, what kind of agency? Is it a local service provider? So you see lots of choices. If you answer other, please complete the blank box to the right and tell us who is in there. So of the people who are referred to the program, did you have anybody who was ineligible? And if so, how many people? You would put that in the box by 7. And what category do these people fit in terms of the target population where their current residence is? And why were they ineligible? Is it because they didn't have a disability, or they were over income, or they were over the age of 62? You may be screening at this stage, for example, for some of the criminal history, like sex offender status. Some of you, depending on how you run your program, you may have a lot of ineligible applicants because your program has a very open application process. For others of you, the application process involves going first through the state service portal, and it may be more of what we call a closed referral system, and so you're not going to have as many ineligible folks. And HUD understands that there's not a one-size-fits-all for these, but these reports will describe how your program is operating. So, next question is, how many folks did you place on your waiting list during this quarter? So I want to point out, you have to read the questions carefully because some of them are cumulative and some of them are point in time. So question 10 is, how many people did you place on the waiting list just this quarter? Some of you, we understand, will have waiting lists in the more traditional sense, and some of you don't. So the numbers will look very different across programs, and that's okay. Question 11 also asks about waiting lists, but it wants to know number of households currently on the waiting list, and that is more of a cumulative question. So maybe you only put 10 people on, go back up there, 10 people on the list this month, but you have 130 on the list because you had 120 the quarter before. You may have a small number because some of you are not going to use the traditional waiting list model. Referrals to PRA units. How many in this quarter, how many households did you refer to PRA units? And of those households, of the households, so in question 13, of the total number of households referred to PRA units, how many moved in during the quarter? This is highlighted in yellow because there's been a change here. The question used to refer to, okay, I did not make the modification here I'm sorry. So this question is supposed to say, this phone number. It removes the reference to, previously it said, of the total number of households referred to PRA units in question 12, how many were moved in during the quarter? We've changed that because certain people were not getting captured that way. So now the difference here for FY12 is anybody who was referred to the PRA unit who moved in during the quarter. That's the question. How many move-ins did you have this quarter? So that's a bit of a shift. That's why it's highlighted in yellow. Question 14, it goes back to those categories again of those folks who moved in. What target populations are they part of? Question 15, we've seen this before, of the people who moved in, what are there, what disability category or categories do they fall into? And again, see the instructions. This is only answered annually at the end of quarter 4 and only if 10 or more applicants or referrals in a disability category. Okay, if you're going to have questions about these, don't forget to put them in the chat box. Question 16. How many of the households that were referred to a unit were rejected by owners? So maybe you referred 20 households, of which 5 moved in and 5 were rejected by owners, or 5 moved in, 5 didn't like the units, and 5 others in your 15 pool were rejected by owners. So HUD wants to know how many. They want to get a handle on the rejections. What categories were these folks in terms of your target population, and why? Was it because of criminal history, poor credit, poor rental history? They were unable to submit some required documentation. Is there another reason? And if there's another reason, please discuss it in the box. The answer, people may have been rejected for a number of reasons, and so you might capture them. That number might be higher than the number of referrals. Tenure. So now we're talking about people who've moved in and have been living in units. HUD wants to get a handle on housing stability. How well are people doing staying in place? So for each quarter, you will answer how many people have been living in a PRA unit for 6 months or less, 7 to 12 months, 13 to 24 months, 25 to 48 months, or more than 4 years. The big change here, and you can see there's yellow everywhere. Previously, this column F, let me see if I can scroll up a little. Column F had an annual total here, which was inappropriate because this is a point in time. In quarter 1, somebody who's been living in a unit for 6 months or less may still be in quarter 2, may still be in this column 6 months or less, or they may have now moved into the 7 to 12 months. These are not cumulative numbers, but point in time. So we've taken off that last column, and that's why the yellow's there. So you're going to answer for each category, the 6 months or less, 7 to 12, etc., how many of those folks are in your target population categories. Those are questions 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and then we get to program transfers and exits. Did people exit the program? They either, both transfers and exits. So 25 is about transfers. Did you have people move from one unit to another? 26, if so, you explain why in 26 there was a changed household size. They need an accessible unit. Maybe there's another reason. If there's another reason, please fill out the box here. The highlight in yellow here is a change, just a clarification that more than one category may apply to an individual. There may be more than one reason that there's a change. Then the next questions are about exits. Households who exited this quarter, why did they exit? Did they leave for other housing? Maybe they had another opportunity. Did the owner initiate? And if so, why? Was it a non-payment issue? Did someone pass away? Did they go back into a hospital? To the best of your ability, this is something HUD is trying to track and understand so it can understand more about how the program's operating. If it's other, you again would fill out the box. Okay, those are the people questions. Now we're talking about the building questions. RAC and ARAC information. So the first thing you'll see is a bunch of yellow. Questions 28 and 29 are new questions that have been added from the form the FY12s have been using. HUD, the TA leads from TAC have been calling you kind of on a regular basis, asking you how many ARACs you've signed or properties you have in your pipeline. And HUD has decided to formalize this and collect it through the programmatic report. So you can see in question 28, they ask for this quarter, how many new ARACs have you signed, or if you don't use ARACs, other kinds of formal agreements, or you're making awards through your tax credit program, but somehow, you know, locking in some units, you would put those numbers in to answer question 28. 29, and question 29 refers to the same properties, but the number of units versus the number of properties. When you go to, we'll look at the standards in 1 second, but the standards have additional explanation about this because this is new for even the FY grantees, FY12 grantees, pardon me. Next question is about RACs. How many RACs, rental assistance contracts, did you execute during the quarter? And for those RACs in 31, HUD is asking you to pick one primary financing mechanism for the property. And again, we can look at this in the standards. Most, as you know, those of you on the phone who work at the development end, you know, most of your affordable housing properties are going to have a number of these different sources in them to make the deals work. They're asking you to pick the primary one and indicate that here on this chart. They'd like to get a handle on where the leverage is coming from for this program. You can see that the National Housing Trust Fund has been highlighted now that states will have access to that resource for the first time. I think folks are thinking you might have, that might be one of the funding mechanisms, and so it's been added to the list. Question 32 is a little chart that will help HUD understand compare their thinking on RACs with what you think. Take the number of RACs from the last quarter, add the ones you executed this quarter, subtract any RACs that you lost in this last quarter, hopefully 0, and you get your total current RACs. From the RACs, we move on to talking about the units. So the RAC is the property level. HUD now has some questions at the unit level. You can see a lot of yellow on your screen. This is, again, yellow highlights a change. This information has not been collected before. As all of you may be aware, hopefully are aware, in both the FY12 and the FY13 NOFAs, there were incentives for you all to tell HUD that you were going to bring some units below FMR units to the table, and many of you did, not all of you. And they would like you to report on the units that you are signing up. Where did they fit in this chart? So are you bringing some units at 20% of AMI, some at 30, some at 40? They'd like to get a handle on that. If it's other, please indicate how many and fill out the box on the right. You can see all the way to the right. If you had an initial commitment that you have now discussed with HUD and there's been a change from your initial application, they're asking you to clarify, to identify that in this box to the right. 34 is similar. For new RACs executed during the quarter, what's the number of units in these different, that you're bringing to the table at these different rent levels? Okay. 35. So previously in the question 3031 was about how many RACs did you sign up this quarter. HUD's now asking how many units were in these RACs. How many units did you have at the end of last quarter? How many new units did you sign up this quarter? How many units left this quarter? And what's your current total of units? 36, they want to know for the those units, what's the bedroom breakdown? How many 0 bedrooms or SROs do you have? 1s, 2s, and 3s. You should get the same total for that as 37 is a unit breakdown by accessibility characteristics. When HUD understands that you may not know these, that when you, for example, when you initially sign a RAP, you know you're going to get 10 units, you're not sure which 10 they're going to be, you don't know for the next 10 applicants what their needs are going to be, and you know, so you're not necessarily going to lock in a certain kind of unit. The program doesn't require that. It's very flexible that way. But to the extent that you do know, HUD's asking you to report that, and you can see what's in the yellow box that's new for the FY12, that you can adjust the totals as unit accessibility features are known. So maybe in quarter 1 you have no idea, but by quarter 4 you know you have 5 units that are accessible for people with visual impairments and 2 for people with mobility impairments. Question 38. Oops, sorry about that. 38, this is not new language, but it's highlighted in yellow for the 12s because if you look at the definitions, there are now definitions in the standards to help clarify that. Hold on one sec, please. So in 38, so this is an important box. How many of the units that you have, how many are leased, how many are vacant, and how many are not available? And that's the not available category is why the definitions were changed. This is really tied into some of the other forms that you have to complete, voucher-related forms for the track system. We know that many of you, a number of FY12 states have identified 90% of the units that you will use for your program, but many are not available because they're currently occupied by non-PRA applicants. That's the box for those folks. So the yellow is just saying, look at the standards and the definition. The next 39 and 40 are about the leveraged housing units. Some, but not all of you, committed leveraged vouchers, public housing units, other kind of units to the program. And HUD, in the 12 application, there was one question. Now there are two, there's just a clarification here in the language, but basically the same question. The narrative questions. There are 2 narrative questions. One asks about challenges that you've seen this past quarter, and the other is about your successes. HUD is interested about knowing both. The reason words past quarter are highlighted in red is initially HUD had asked for this report twice a year, but a few months ago they asked for it regularly every quarter. So I want to remind everybody that it is due to HUD on a quarterly basis. Okay, I don't see any questions, which is kind of surprising to me. So please use the chat box for questions. We're going to move on to the other tool. We are going to go to the budget reporting tool. This is also a Excel spreadsheet, instructions tab, and then this is what the tool looks like that you'll be using every quarter, again on the fiscal year cycle as Katina and Marvis discussed. So the top portion of the budget, you can see the red says actual. So this part of the chart, you're going to be putting in your actual information about rental assistance funds, number of units related to the rental assistance, and admin costs. The blue cells are the cells that you can you use to put your funding information in, and the totals, the cells that are white have calculations in them, so they're not locked. So yeah, you can change them, but we're hoping you won't. We're hoping you'll just use it as is. If you type in this cell, it makes your work more, not less. We're going to show you a sample in a second, but this is the form that you use. You can see this has fiscal year, the 2016, the fiscal year, the 4 quarters. What happens with this form is you complete it, you send it in to HUD with a copy to Stacy. HUD reviews it. Stacy, now, but she'll be getting some help with this in the future. She will send it back to you at some point, rolling it over to the next year, okay? It's our feeling that it's too hard to see too many quarters at once. So once you get through the year, we'll hide 16, and you'll see 17 in the first couple of quarters of 18. And that's something that HUD has asked us to do for you. The bottom cells are for projections. Again, grantees put the data into the blue cells, and you can see the total rental assistance will pop out. The bottom is only for the rental assistance. This is an opportunity for you. This is was set up for you to get an idea of where you are with your obligated funds. So the top part is, you know, with what you've committed, what you've drawn down and spent. But if you have some new units you know are going to come on the next quarter, then you have some encumbered funds, and that money will show up on the bottom part. Let me just show you a quick example. So this is a grantee, and you can see this grantee spent in quarter, this is for FY14, they spent about $7,000 in rental assistance in quarter 3 and quarter 4. They've spent a total of $13,740, and you can see how much they're going to be spending in quarter 1 and 2, or they have spent in the first 2 quarters of 15. The second column tells you that initially they had 5 units by the end of the first fiscal year, but they added 10 and then another 5, and that's how they got to the $27,000. The maximum rental assistance amount for this state is $2 million, and they've drawn down at this point $61,830, right? That's 13,000 in 14 plus 20 plus 27 is 61,830. That's 3% of the maximum, and this is how much is their remaining funds. So it's a very simple spreadsheet to help you keep track of where you are. I imagine some of you probably have more complicated spreadsheets that you can use to complete this when you have to submit it to HUD every quarter. Column D covers the administrative costs, and you can see how much has been drawn down by this entity, $1,500 in fiscal year 14, plus another $2,750. They can draw down up to $160,000. They've drawn down $42.50, which is about 3%. You don't have, it happens to be the same percentage as the rental assistance. This program does not require you, it's not like Shelter Plus Care or Section 8 where the admin is directly linked to every unit. Some of you are going to be spending admin funds up front to purchase a piece of software, but many of you will want to think about making sure you can spread out the admin money over time. And then you see the totals. You can see how the projections work at the bottom. This entity, for the next couple of quarters, you can see that they don't expect to have any increase. They're going to be with 20 units for quarter 3 of 15, quarter 4 of 15, and then at the beginning of the next year, fiscal year, they're going to be adding 10. And so for 30 units, and you can see the total rental assistance is going to go up at that point. So again, this is sort of a very simple spreadsheet to make sure that that you're tracking your funds, you don't overspend admin or your rental assistance. I'm going to turn it back over to Marvis, and then we'll see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Lisa. That was a lot of information to cover with those 2 tools, but just be assured that it is very important that you complete them in accordance to the instructions that we provided, and feel free to reach out to your TA lead if you have questions regarding those. So as you've been reviewing these, you probably have been thinking about where and how you're going to gather the information that is going to be inserted into these reports, and then also how you're going to work with your human services or your Medicaid partners to track and collect the data about the applicants and the referrals, and also probably about how you're going to get data on the tenants and how you'll be able to pull the data from tracks, and also for the rack and unit information. So some of you may have smaller programs and feel confident that you can collect this information by hand, and then others of you have larger programs that may make it hard to use a simple spreadsheet or to gather the information. Okay, well, good. So here you'll see some examples of sources that you can use as a database in collecting some of this information. Some of our grantees are using SocialServe, Yardi, Access database, and some even use an Excel spreadsheet, and some use a local or proprietary software such as what's being done in Massachusetts and Texas. So as you can see, there's a variety of sources that you can look to get the information. Okay, so at this point we are open for questions that anyone might have.
And we do. We have a question from Connecticut. Tawny, I'm going to unmute you, and we'll start with you, and I see a couple other hands. Tawny, I think you're unmuted.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, super. Yes, I had a question about the program reporting, and that's for questions 28 and 29 about the ARACs in particular. Because I understand ARACs aren't necessarily required for us to use those. So basically, you know, we have owners that, you know, we haven't asked them to use the ARAC, and they're not under any type of formal agreement, but they have shown committed interest, and they've completed the rent schedule to let us know what they're proposing for the number of units and type of units. Would I use that data for those 2 questions? Would that be applicable?
Well, let's take a quick look at the standards for a second, okay? Mm-hmm. So the definition, so if we look at column D, grantee will have to track information regarding the number of ARACs and other formal agreements to secure units for the program. In addition to ARACs, agreements can include memorandum of understanding signed by the state and owner, letter of agreement signed by the owner, funding award, so for example, a tax credit home, state fund, funding award letter to the owner that mentions the commitment of PRA units, closing documents, other similar documents that the grantee determines indicates firm commitment to the program. So I think, Katina, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what what your goal is in here, which units you want in and not in here?
So I think in order to also to help you to facilitate and understand exactly how many units are coming online, you should have some sort of written agreement, understanding with that owner as to their commitment for entering into the program.
You want to make sure that that when you count the pipeline units, they're really going to come into the program.
That's right. Yes. Thanks, Lisa. That is
correct.
correct.
Don't want them to be inflated.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I think that's why, if Tawny, if you all feel that it's a real commitment, and you have
get it in writing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joanne? Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Joanne McKenna, you have a question? I think you've been unmuted.
Hi, thanks. I had a question about the budget report and the projection section. And I'm wondering, given the timing of when units are coming online, if there's a way, we're doing mostly new development, and it feels like the projection section is really just guessing in terms of when units are going to come online, and it's rather a lot of work for something that doesn't feel accurate, and if it's not accurate, it's not really useful to HUD, I would think, but it can't be accurate because it's there's so much we can't control. So I'm wondering if we can't move the projection portion of this report to maybe twice a year rather than quarterly, because it is still rather a lot of work, and if there's a way to avoid that work, I'd really appreciate it. I guess it's not a question as much as it is a comment.
Do you want to take that under consideration?
We can, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Okay. So it seems like something that will be hard for you to answer right away. So.
And so, Joanne, is that mainly the case when there's new construction?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. There's all kinds of delays. There's, something can go under agreement or ARAC and for whatever reason not come online. It's time consuming to fill out this report, and as we start to manage both grants, whatever we can do to ease the reporting a little bit would be much appreciated. Maybe we could revisit this, agree to revisit it at some point.
Okay. Yes. Sure, we'll take it under consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, Joanne, I'm muting you and see if there are any other hands up. Anybody have, let's see, does anybody have any questions? Can you throw them in the chat box or press the little hand to show that you have a question?
I'm going to talk about why these numbers are here. Why there's 10, why you only report.
Oh, sure. I do see some questions. Okay. While I'm getting that, Marvis had suggested that we talk about something, but while I'm getting that set up, I'm going to unmute Linda Richard. Hi, Linda. Do you have a question? You're unmuted.
Yes, this is me. Hi, this is Linda with IPM Software. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. My question was related, I guess, to Flossie in reference to the 811 Pro voucher. There was originally a discrepancy between the printed co-op voucher and the electronic voucher. And some of the software vendors had submitted an email to Flossie asking or actually providing recommendations for a change. I wanted to see if there was any comment on that.
Thank you for your question, Linda. This webinar is about the programmatic reporting tool. If you want to touch base with Flossie offline, I would think you should do that. I think we're trying to get questions about anyone who has any questions about the webinar or the reporting tool.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Before we see if there are any other questions, hold on. Again, I'm not as facile at this as Stacy is. Marvis suggested we just take a quick look on the programmatic report at number 5. It's under 5 and 15. These are the questions around disability and why you provide the information only if you have 10 or more persons in a disability category. So the reason is that we understand that disability is it's a personal, sensitive privacy issue. It is also, as you know, an eligibility criteria. We do not expect housing agencies to collect or save this information if that's something they don't want to do, but the state service partner, it is something within their purview, and HUD feels that it is something that's important to track because they work with service partners across the federal level, and this is, you know, of interest to them in how they think about the program and the services that need to come to support people, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason there's only 10 or more in the category, we talked with some folks who do some research, people in our office who work on research, and in order to ensure that no individual would be able to be identified through this information that is collected, the determination was made that if that many people were in a category, it would not be possible for any one individual to be identified with personal information. So that's kind of why it was set up that way. Hopefully that was a somewhat clear answer. Joanne, I can't tell if you have another question or I did not clear, so I'm going to unmute you for a second. Do you have a second question?
I actually think I had a first question.
Okay.
And it goes back, I think, to this report, the programmatic one. So if someone, just to clarify, someone is found not eligible, that refers to being eligible or not eligible for 811, and rejected by owners is related more to tenancy and the housing situation. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So here the eligibility piece is here. This piece here is to the program. Yep. And that determination might be made at the service agency or it might be made at the housing agency, but it would be for the program versus this question here, which is about which were referred to a unit and who were not accepted by an owner.
Okay, so it actually, they could be rejected for ineligibility if they're over income. Yes. And that would be an 811 eligibility question, yep. Even if they were, okay.
Yeah, so the eligibility, the HUD required eligibility requirements would be you have to have a disability, you have to be eligible for some sort of long-term support services as defined by your program and in your PRA agreement with your state agency. You have to be between ages of 18 and 62. You have to be under 62 by the time you lease. And did I say you have to have a disability? So
yeah.
And income, 30% of AMI for the household or below for income. So those would be the HUD required eligibility criteria. Your program might have something additional to that. the owners, it would be more of a screening issue.
Okay. Wow, I feel like I'm wandering down a rabbit hole a little bit. So, so for our program, there's a so there's the 811 eligibility requirements, and then we could have Massachusetts, given our target population, they could be ineligible for our 811 program based on how we defined our populations and who we were going to serve.
Yeah.
So there's
okay. Some grantees said you must be chronically homeless, or you must be in the MSP program or living in an institution. And some grantees said our priority is for people in institutions, but we'll take other people who meet the basic criteria as well. So you all did it differently. Some of you are going to kind of find people ineligible because they don't meet your target population, and others of you will still put them on your list.
Got it. Thanks.
Thanks. I think we're going to close out. I don't see any more questions. We're going to close out by just saying to the FY12 grantees, I think all three of us who are sitting here want to congratulate you. The last set of quarterly reports was really excellent. There were, a few little things here or there, but we thank you very much for taking care and doing a really good job. It makes it easier for everybody. And we know that all of you on the phone will, if you don't get the first round, the next quarter will be good. So do we have time for one more? It looks like we have one more question. Yeah. Okay. We're a little over, but okay. Last question, Tani. It looks like you raised a question.
Yes, just because you mentioned that, I was wondering if there is an update on the total units leased for the program nationwide, if you happen to have that.
We are in a conference room with nothing but the computer, so I'm not sure anybody's prepared to answer that question now, but maybe on the, we can talk about it on the peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. Just wondering if you knew that by chance.
Okay, well,
I would like to close out this webinar and like for thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. If you have any questions, you can email myself, Katina Washington, or Marvis Hagewood, or definitely contact your TAC lead if you have any questions about the reporting tool. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.